Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, students. Welcome to the method. Which method, students? Direct method. Alright. So today we are here for another lecture. Which lecture? Do you know? Yes, students. Today we are here for 5th lecture on TOEFL. Alright. So this is the lecture. Very important because these days we are talking about a very important method, that is direct method, and we abbreviate this method as DM. D stands for direct and M stands for the method. Why I say it's important method? Because if you see around, this method is being used in the institutions and successfully being used, successfully being employed by the teachers of different languages. Of course, here in our case, particularly the English language teachers, they have been using this method successfully, and this method has definitely given good results to the institution, to the learners particularly, and even the teachers are satisfied with this method. Teacher feels, and of course the people who teach through this method, they are quite satisfied with this method, and they are of the view that this method works well. So these days we are talking about this method. By the way, what is direct method? We had a discussion last week. Who would answer my query? Yes? Oh, get up here, wake up. See, we are going to start a lecture. Get up. Try. What is it? You see, a method in which no translation is there. Good. A method in which mother tongue is not there. Fine. Good. A method in which meaning should be connected directly with the target language. Very good, of course. So that is another, of course, definition of this direct method, that a method in which meaning, what the learning in fact, is connected, what? Directly with the target language, and there is no concept of translation. Without translating, right, without translating that target language into L1, language 1, we learn the language. Is that clear? So that's why we call it direct method, because directly, right, learner try to learn the language directly. So students, come here for today's the lecture. So as usual, what do we have? We have what? The roadmap of today's lecture. Fine, that's what we are going to do in this lecture. What we are going to do, students? Yes, you can see the slide. First of all, as usual, we will, yes, review the previous lecture. What was that? Alright, right? Lecture 4. Fine. And we had a detailed discussion on flaws of what? Which flaws of? Yes, GTM, grammar translation method. So we had a discussion on that. Okay, you want to have a, yes? All right. I'll review those the flaws, and then we will move on. So then in this lecture we'll talk about what are the principles of direct method. Clear? And then we'll move on to techniques, and finally I'll give you the summary of today's lecture. So very brief, students. Fine. I hope you're clear about this. Today's lecture would revolve around what? I mean, first of all, what are the flaws of GTM, and then principles and techniques. Fine. So I told you in the last lecture, what are the weaknesses? Who would tell me the weaknesses, the flaws that grammar translation method have? And that's why we needed a method, because if one method, of course, is a failure, if one method does not help the learner as per the desires, as per the expectations, so students, what do? Yeah, we need a better method, of course. So, right, if you compare, and we had, of course, compared this method as well with grammar translation method. So the point is that this method is better. Which method? Direct method is better than grammar translation method. And there were some flaws. What were the flaws? One thing, okay, grammar. How grammar was taught? You see? Okay, right. Deductive method of grammar. See, what is that? The teacher, of course, teach grammar through deductive method. What is deductive method, students? Well, students, so we're talking about the flaws of this method. And what are the flaws, students? Right? What are the flaws? Well, see, deductive method of grammar teaching. So what is the deductive method, students? You remember? Well, students, I mean, you're right that what we do here, the teacher, what does he do, students? The teacher gives rules first, and then, yes, and then he makes students practice. So this is what we call it deduction, right? Rules are given first. For example, when teacher teaches present simple tense or past tense or present continuous tense or the past continuous tense, or teacher talks about active voice or passive voice, so what he does, the teacher gives rules, and even sometimes he writes rule on the board, right? And he writes with the heading formula for constructing a sentence of present simple tense, right? So he writes a formula on that, some subject, it could be plus verb plus s or es plus object. See, so this can be a formula. And then again he gives formula for present continuous tense and present perfect tense, or any grammatical item that the teacher wants to teach. So he gives what? Rules first. The teacher thinks that once students would know the rule, they would be able to make sentences. And once the teacher, after giving them the rules, the teacher asks the students to practice, and of course they practice in writing and all that. So this was the method of teaching grammar, that is deductively grammar was taught. So again, very important, you know that speaking skill and listening skills were ignored. In grammar translation method, we saw that the teacher focuses on which two skills, students? Literacy skills. Which skills? Literacy skills. Literacy. Now, who would tell me what are literacy skills? Think, you can take your time. Yes. Try again. Rack your brains. Reading. Good. And writing. Very good, of course. Students, yes. So this shows that you have done your job. You have worked in the, of course, for the lecture. So students, these are what literacy skills mean, reading and writing skills. So the grammar translation method, in fact, in that method, the teacher tries to improve students' reading skills and writing skills, and more focus is given to these two skills. So ultimately what happens? The listening and speaking are ignored. So this was the flaw that we had. We talked about that. Then there was no focus on pronunciation, right? So pronunciation is a very important sub-skill of speaking. If the speaker mispronounces words, so again, of course, if a speaker mispronounces words, so the speaker mispronounces and the listener would not be able to get him, in fact. Listener would not be able to get his message well. Particularly when you talk to a native speaker and you mispronounce the word, and the native speaker knows the correct pronunciation, so there would be what? There would be confusion. Both the speaker and listener would be on different pages. They won't be able to communicate well. Why? Because the speaker mispronounces words, in fact. So that's what in this method we saw, that pronunciation was ignored. And then again we saw that there was no interaction among students in the class, and there were only, the teacher-student interaction was there, and students were not encouraged for interaction. And the class was teacher-centered class. Again, of course, because we discussed that GTM is one of the oldest methods, so the teacher was all in all, and the class is teacher-centered because teacher is the knowledge provider. Teacher thinks that he knows, in fact, more than his students, and he is the authority, and he is there to help students out. He is there to give them grammatical rules. Teacher is there to give them vocabulary items. Teacher is there to help them out in their composition, all that. So this is what the class is. We call it teacher-centered approach. And again, of course, if you see the modern techniques where the classes are now student-centered classes. So that was another flaw. And then again, focus was on accuracy, in fact. There was no, fluency was altogether ignored, but the focus was on which one? Accuracy. So students, these were some of the flaws that we talked about, and I hope you know these things. And I told you that this topic is very important for your examination point of view. And you know why? Because this can be a background knowledge. Once we know the flaws, then we can rightly say that we need a method. We need a better method. Which method? A method that should focus on communication, a method that should teach grammar inductively, right? A method that should focus on pronunciation, a method that should be student-centered. Clear? So, knowing these flaws, yes, you would be able to think that, well, these are the flaws, and therefore we need a method that would overcome these flaws, that would fix these problems, so that ultimately the goal is that the learner would be able to use language, right? Use language for, yes, in a real situation. This is the purpose, of course. If a learner is unable to use a language in different situations, so that will not serve the purpose. And if the learner is able to use language in different situations, it means the purpose of language learning is served. So that is, here are some flaws. I hope you have understood these flaws. Now move on. Today's lecture. Today we'll talk about, we are going to talk about principles of what? Which method? Direct method. Fine. And of course, techniques of direct method. Again, before I start talking of this direct method, I also gave you introduction in the last lecture on what? On direct method, that what is direct method. And I told you, my dear students, that it is a natural method of language learning. Again, you could say why it is a natural method of language learning. Why we call this word natural? So dear students, again, when you see that the way you and I have acquired our language one, it could be your, what is your language one? Language one, the first language that you have acquired. Okay, is it Pashto? Fine. Yes, Ali, what is your language one? Saraiki. Yes, Mustafa, what is your language one? It is, okay, fine. What is it? It is Pahari. All right. So dear students, yes, these are the language one. Again, we also call it the mother tongue, in fact. Mother tongue, right? M-O-T-H-E-R-T-O-N-G-U-E, mother tongue. The language that you learn, acquire from your mother, in fact. Again, mother, siblings, right? Who are siblings, by the way? Who are siblings? Your brothers and sisters, they are your sibling students. So, these siblings, they help you, in fact. Who else? Your parents. Who else? In fact, your society, in fact, your class fellows. So all these people, they help you in that. And direct method, I have already told you that a method where, yes, the meaning is connected directly with the target language. So once the meaning is connected directly with the target language, so what do? We exclude right? We do not use which language? Mother tongue. So that is mean directly language is learned. So we being TEFL teachers, we in fact use this method to teach the language directly. And why? Because there is no mother tongue. Mother tongue is not used in this my method. Directly the teacher teaches this language, and of course the success rate is high. Of course, if you use this the method, the learner in fact, of course, they learn the language well. So that was, we had a brief discussion on this the method, the why it is natural method, and and again we went to a class. Remember that? The class proceeding. What was going on in that class? Yes, of course, the teacher asked the question to the students, student reply, and there was interaction among the students. Remember that? So that was again a class, and you saw that class in detail. So move on to today's lecture. That is what? Principles of direct method, and then we'll move on to techniques. So before we move on to the principle, what are principles, by the way? I told you once, what is a principle? A thought which is invisible. Again, yes. So if, for example, if I give you example, if the teacher gives vocabulary items, like you saw in the grammar translation method, this teacher gives vocabulary items. What is the principle behind? Yes, of course, what is that? Vocabulary building. So again, my dear students, whatever the activity we use in the class, there should be a principle behind that, why this activity is what exploited. For example, the teacher asks the students to come in front of the dice, right? So what happens? What is the principle behind? To improve speaking skill of the students, to give confidence to the students, in fact, to improve their public speaking, in fact. Or, for example, the teacher, what he does, that he gives a dialogue to two students, in fact, and they in fact interact. So what is the principle behind? To improve what? Dialogue. That student would be able to interact at different situations. So again, I tell you that whatever activity, whatever technique that you use, there is a principle behind. And I have told you in the very first lecture that these principles and techniques, both they make what? Your method. And so far we talked about grammar translation method, and we are talking about direct method, in fact. So principles, can you tell me some principles? Because you have seen the class, we had a detailed discussion on that class, we saw the proceeding of the class. Can you give me any principle of this the method? What is the principle? You see? Okay, what? Communication. All right. What else? Fine. The class is teacher-centered. Okay, fine. Good, students. So let's start now. See that what are the principles. So again, the first thing, what are the goals of the teacher using direct method? What goals the teacher in fact want to achieve? Why the teacher depends on this method, which goals he wants to achieve. So what? To teach learners to think in target language without translating into L1. So this is very important point, that we encourage our student, and we saw in the method that the teacher encourages students to think in the target language. Clear? So once you start thinking in the target language, then you can overcome this interference of language one. So when you think in that language, so then you can learn that language better. So that's why the teacher in this class is trying his level best to teach this, of course, the learners, so that to motivate the learners to think in which language? In the target language. So which means that he excludes, in fact, mother tongue. So once you make the students to think in the target language, so definitely they would think, in fact, think of various expression. They, of course, they would imagine themselves in different situations, and they would not consider this mother tongue. And again, once you make your students that you have to communicate in this target language, you have to communicate in the language that you are learning, so of course students naturally they would try and they would not take help of mother tongue. In the last method we saw that the student had what leverage, they had liberty to switch to the code, switch to mother tongue, and they did it, but the results were not up to the expectations. But here in fact what we do not encourage students, in fact we discourage students, and the teacher, we saw in this proceeding that he discourages students to use mother tongue. So what happens, he makes the students to think in the target language, and once you think in the target language, my dear students, so definitely what happens, you see, so you improve this language and you learn this language well, and you know, the students know that well they cannot switch their code, they cannot translate the language into your L1, so they have whatever they know, they have to communicate in this target language, and ultimately they start thinking in the target language. Again, yes, we may have a question, like we people, of course, I mean, Urdu is our national language, and we have all other regional languages are there. Maybe you are Punjabi speaking, maybe you are Hindi speaking, maybe you are, in fact, your language are different. So the point is that we people, when we speak, when we try to speak English, so we speak slowly, right? We cannot be fluent in that language. Why is it so? Have you ever thought that why we can't speak fluently? The point is again, because we majority, of course most of us are the product of which the L1, I mean grammar translation method. So what we do, we translate language from that L1 to even our national language, and from national to international language. So that's why we are slow speakers. And of course, you see a native speaker, for example, or if a student has learned this language through direct method, so he'll be fluent, right? He will not, I mean, of course, in the process of what? Translating, or in the process of thinking, translating from one language to another. So that's why when you start thinking in the target language, so you become more fluent. Again, another, of course, the goal of the teacher is that to help the learners, in fact, teaching learners to communicate in target language. Clear? So this is very important, right? That of course we help the teacher helps the students, in fact, so that they would be able to communicate in the language that they are learning, and we call it target language. And we see that students, like we saw in the class, that students speak in the target language, they listen to the target language, they read and they write in the target. So all four skills are there. Fine, because they communicate, the teacher talks and they listen, in fact. Fine, and again, then this, of course, they speak, they reply. The teacher asks them a question and they reply. There's one student asks question to another and he replies. So all the four skills are being used, right? So that's why, I mean that is for a proficient learner. A proficient learner needs to, of course, speak, right? Needs to write, listen, and of course what else? Read. So both oracy skills and literacy skills are being exploited, are being used successfully in this method, like we saw. And the teacher in fact helps the students to interact, to communicate, to listen, to read and write. And again, another very important thing, my dear student, is that well, every day, right, what situational interaction is there? Situational based teaching is there. In fact, different situations are given, and that's why when, of course, the teacher designs activities considering keeping in mind different situations, so of course the student learn how to communicate in different situations. And students, you know that when you change a situation and you have to change the language, of course, so situation in fact changes when the context is changed, so definitely vocabulary items, of course, sentence patterns, of course, has to be changed. So therefore, the goals of the teacher using the direct method is that, well, to teach the learners to think in target language, and second, teaching learners to communicate in target language. Very important. Again, this is the goal that the teacher has to achieve. What is the goal? First goal is, well, to teach learners to think in target language. Fine. I hope you will try now. You being TEFL teachers, you all TEFL teachers. Now again, I tell you again, well, you are teachers, but again, a teacher seeks more than the learner. But at the moment, we all are TEFL students. Yes, students. So, what will we do? Being a teacher, we will help our learners, we'll teach our learners to think in the target language. And now it's up to you. What do you do for it? What would you do? Which activities would you design? Right? So that students would not think of thinking in, of course, their mother tongue. So they would start thinking and they would be encouraged to think. Which language? Alright, target language. And again, of course, teaching learners to communicate, to use all the 4 skills. Which skills? RSC and literacy skills. Very good. And again, you would design activities. Which activities? Yeah, activities so that students would speak as per different situations. So that was the goal. Again, what is the role of the teacher? I hope you understand. Yeah, in grammar, in this direct method, what is the role? What is the specific role of the teacher? In fact, what is the role? What do you think? Any idea? Try. Yes. Ali, can you try? Teacher? What is the role of a teacher? Yes? Alright. Again, the teacher, in fact, helps learner understand the passage by reading again, loud reading. Yes, students? Remember that? See, so when a learner reads loud, in fact, so what happens? Of course, when you read loud, you listen to yourself. Right? So again, this is one. Again, when you read loud, you learn to pronounce words. Again, when you read loud, you comprehend a passage well. Silent reading, you may not understand a passage. On the other hand, if you read a passage loud, dear students, so you can comprehend that passage well, you can understand that passage well. So loud reading is recommended. You need to read loud, and you also you need to encourage your students for loud reading. So this is one technique, that when you read loud, so you correct yourself, right, and others may correct you if you mispronounce a word, and of course you improve your comprehension. Again, another role of teacher is what he does. He illustrates, right? He demonstrates the meaning in target language. Like we saw, the teacher draws. Fine, the mountain ranges he draws, of course. So what the teacher does? He demonstrates. What is it? Glasses case, for example. The student asks, what is it? Fine, and then see, again teacher, right, glasses that we wear, for example. The teacher says, what is it? Right? The students reply, well, it's a pen, for example. I hope you understand. What is it? Right? See, the teacher asks questions and the student reply. What? Something that we use in computer. So this is, my dear student, the word demonstration. What is it? Demonstration. And again, while demonstrating, what do? Yes, you use your body language. What is body language? Does my body have language? What do you think, students? Yes? Oh yes, students, yes, body language, yeah, of course, whenever you communicate. I tell you, I refer to a communicator, Munter, says that the communication is combination of verbal and non-verbal signals. Which combinations? Verbal and non-verbal signals. Now what are verbal signals, in fact? Verb, the words, in fact, right? And verbal again mean 2 parts, the orals and what? Written. I hope you understand. So dear students, Munter says, Mary Munter is a famous business communicator. She says that communication is combination of verbal and non-verbal signals. Clear? Now what from the word verb. Now what are verbal signals? They can be oral, right? Or they can be written. Fine. On the other hand, non-verbal signals. Now what are non-verbal signals? This body language is one element of non-verbal signals. Yes students, you understand? So non-verbal is one element of what? This body language is, my dear students, is one element of non-verbal communication. And what is body language? Yes, your postures, your gestures, your facial expressions, your eye contact. Clear? So these are what body language. Now what is posture, by the way? The way you sit, right? And the way you stand, that is what posture. What are gestures, students? Yeah, the gesture for fist, right? What is it? Gesture. Different gestures are there. What is this gesture? Thumbs up, the gesture. Thumbs down, gesture, well done. And thumbs down. So again, the body language. The teacher uses which language? Body language, my dear students. So he uses body language. Also he points to items. What is it? Bottle. What is that? Example, what is that? Wall clock. What is it? See? So a tablet. So again, the teacher points. And also he uses map, for example, right? And also he uses the board. And then also he uses drawing on the board. So that's why the question, the teacher, the student asks the question, and the teacher, what the teacher tries to draw that on the board, right? And the students get the message, right? A picture is drawn and the student get the message. That what does that picture say? The person looks serious or person looks what? Happy. Fine. So of course, my dear students, that is what the teacher does. He illustrates, he demonstrates. Is that clear? Again, what is the role of the teacher? He directs what? Classroom activities. Fine. The teacher, what he does? He directs, of course. For example, students do exercises, right? And the students and the teacher directs them, of course. Also, he helps them in oral activities, and particularly choral activities. C-H-O-R-L. Oral, in fact, and choral activities, the teacher directs them. And also the teacher, another role of teacher is, he involves the students in classroom activities. Fine, students. So this is what the role of a teacher, that a teacher in direct method, that he teaches and makes learner understand the passage. He asks them to read loud, right? And what does loud reading do, students? Yes, it improves your comprehension. Fine. Loud reading improves your pronunciation. Good. Loud reading gives you confidence. Fine. Of course, very good. And then what else teacher does? What he does, students? He demonstrates. Fine. What else he does? He points out. How? Through his body language. Very good. Then also pointing to items. Also he draws on the board. What is body language? Language of the body? Yes. Alright. Body language is, technical term for body language is kinesics. K-I-N-E-S-I-C-S. Kinesics is the technical term for body language. Yes, students? Alright. So also a teacher directs the classroom activities. Either they are oral activities or they are written exercises. The teacher directs them and he involves the students in classroom activities. This is of course the role of a teacher. Again, what else teacher does? He invites students to repeat after him, in fact. For example, teacher says that, well, I am going to post office. And the students say, yes, we are going to post office. Or the one students, I am going to post office. Fine. So again, he invites students to, because once the student, in fact, maybe initially initially the students reply in choral. And then later on, individually they can reply, because once you reply in chorus, right? So they gain confidence. Again, what the teacher does, he ensures what? Interaction and communication with the students. right? He in fact makes students to communicate with one another, and even the students communicate with the teacher as well. So because this is the goal, right? What? Interaction is a goal, of course. So that's why the teacher does it. So he is a good teacher. In fact, he is, right? He knows that if I don't do it, I may not be able to achieve my goal, of course. Again, to be more democratic rather than autocratic. Again, of course, we go back. The teacher was autocratic. The class was teacher-centered. But here it is democratic class. Democratic class. What does class mean? Well, see, everybody has right to interact. People can ask questions. They can interact with one another. So class environment is more congenial, more in fact what? Friendly, where two students can interact. So this is what we call it, that we have what? More democratic class system. And then the teacher again gives time, more time and space to the students. Fine. Again, this is another, of course, we could say that the role of a teacher is, what he does, that he gives space to the students. He gives time to the students, in fact. So that is important. Once the students are given space, fine, they find it easy to reply, and they in fact they are motivated by the teachers to interact. So this is another good step. And again, another role of the teacher is that he withdraw himself and let students participate. Once the teacher observes that students have started interacting with one another, and they are now, of course, one-to-one with one another, they can interact well, there is no barrier between them. So now the teacher withdraws himself and he just sees, in fact, he just monitors activities. So again, this is what the role of the teacher that is there, that in this method, what teacher, first he helps students interact, and then he withdraws himself. He directs the activities, he demonstrates, and also he, in fact, help learners, understand the passage. So this is what, my dear student, is the role of the teacher. Yes, what is the role of a teacher, students? Should we take a pause? Yes. What's the role of teacher, students? Who would tell me? The teacher directs activities. Fine. What else? Teacher. Yes, students. Teacher encourages comprehension. Teacher encourages reading. Fine. What else? Teacher withdraws when the student interact, in fact. What else? He invites students to repeat after him. When the teacher says something, and other students, they follow him, in fact. The clock has struck 10. Now, the student would follow him, would repeat this sentence. And again, the teacher ensures interaction, communication. What else? Teacher uses body language. He, of course, through the different items, he, in fact, teaches the target language. So this is what the role of a teacher, students. Now moving on, what are the characteristics of teaching learning process? In this method, direct method that we are in fact discussing in this lecture, and we had a discussion in the last lecture. So what are the in fact characteristics of this teaching learning process in this method particularly? See, what is it? Direct association between target language and the meaning. This is, see, that in this process, of course, the one characteristics is that, of course, like I told you in the beginning, what is it? That meanings are linked, what? Directly with the target language, and there is no translation, and there is no mother tongue. So see here what? There is direct association between target language and meaning, in fact. So meanings are conveyed directly in the target language. And if, of course, the teacher feels it hard, what he does, he in fact demonstrates, he draws, in fact. So he makes use of drawing, he makes use of board to convey the meaning in the target language, and also he encourages students, he in fact makes students to do the same. Then what else? Another characteristics is, we already talked about, there are demonstrations are there. And dear students, of course, we learn more when things are demonstrate. You know, demonstrator in, of course, your colleges and universities, you might have seen the person who demonstrates in, maybe in your labs, in your physics lab, in biology labs, there is a position, of course, and we call it demonstrator, and that person demonstrates practical for you. Is that clear? So here what the teacher does, being a language teacher, teaching foreign language using this method, so he demonstrates. And that the demonstration, in fact, that demonstration helps the learner learn the target language directly, in fact. And again, like where you talk about that the teacher avoids translation, right? No influence of L1, no translation. So the teacher himself avoids, and also he does not let anybody make use of translation. So we, in fact, altogether, why again we talked about earlier that no two languages can have same commonalities. So that's why if you make use of L1, then L1 would interfere, and chances are there that there would be negative transfer. There would be negative transfer, that language L1 would interfere in learning that target language. And again, very important thing, another characteristics, another feature of this is what? That real life situations, realistic situation are exploited in the class. Why? Because the purpose of languages, the goal of language is to communicate in different situations, right? So that's why here the realistic situations are designed, and even when the teacher designs activities, so those activities are based on realism. So realistics are there. For example, language used in banks. Every day, of course, you and I go to bank, and of course you deposit your bill. These days, yes, we have online system as well, but still there is an interaction between the branch manager of a bank, and of course between you and branch manager, or between you and what accountant, or between you and a operation manager. So of course, so there is interaction. You go to a bus stop, for example, there is interaction between of course the conductor and you, or between you and driver. So it is there, a situation. You go to a class, or you get late from your class, what happens, for example? So again, there is an interaction. You, of course, ask for the permission, right, to enter the class, and the teacher asks, for example, why are you late? So again, it is an interaction. Why were you absent yesterday, for example? So again, different situations are there, and this is what the real learning, fine, in a real situation. And that's why, of course, my dear students, that why learning a foreign language in an environment where that language is not used is difficult, as compared to a language that you learn in an environment where that language is used. For example, you go to UK, and you see, you would learn this language, learn English in 2 months, 3 months. Why? Because there is environment there. So here, for example, in our country, we learn this language, and we teach this language as a foreign language. Why? And why? We have to put more efforts. Why? Because, of course, the language, general language of the masses is Urdu, language of the masses is other regional languages. So there is no environment for that, right? So therefore, once being a TEFL of the teacher, if we design activities based on realism, so learning would be productive, in fact. And again, what? Syllabus based on situations, right? So whatever the syllabus is designed, it is based on different situations. So dear students, these are what mean characteristics of what? Which teaching and learning process. Another characteristic is what? Inductive teaching of grammar. Again, yes, last time we talked about deductive. Now what is inductive, by the way? You could say, well, inductive is one that is not deductive. Okay, fine. Or you can say inductive is the opposite of deductive, the deductive method of teaching grammar. Fine, yeah, you can say that. Well, students, okay, inductive is what? If I tell you, if I gave you, for example, 5 sentences. Look, he works in the bank, Ali works in a school, she, in fact, works in a university. Clear? Miss Uzma works what? In a hotel, right? Miss Samina works in a what? In a multinational company. So 5 sentences I gave you, and see, he works, she works, Uzma works, Ali works. Is that clear? Samina works. Can you see what are the common things? The common pattern here? See, he, subject, plus verb, plus S, works. She works, right? And Uzma works. So, what is it? The rule you can, in fact, induce from it that, well, if the pronoun is, masculine, third person, or feminine, third person, so with the verb, what we do? Yes, we add S or ES. Similarly, if the noun is singular, so again, what we do? We say works instead of work. I hope you understand. So this is one, what? Inductive teaching of grammar. So in simple words, my dear students, inductive teaching of grammar is where rules are given in advance, right? Sorry, that is deductive. Inductive method of grammar is where different sentences are given, different samples are given, and students are expected to infer rules from that. So this is what inductive teaching of grammar. Again, students, next what characteristic is? Vocabulary practice by using words in full sentences. Again, mind you, here that the use, right? Vocabulary is important part of language, very important area of language. Vocabulary is what? The words that we have. But here, the vocabulary practice, how? By using words in full sentences. And you might remember that this teacher asks a question and the student replies in yes, no. And what teacher? Yes, he directs the students to give me full answer, right? So again, if you remember that when the student asks what does a meaning, for example, and the teacher tells them, well, mean that you are sitting between, for example. I hope you understand. So this is and this way how that this, of course, vocabulary is taught how? By making student practice, of course, using full sentences. So these are what we call them characteristics of language, what? Teaching. Now students, nature of interaction. Which kind of interaction is there in this the method? Interaction between what? The teacher-student interaction or student-student interaction, right? So again, if you talk about teacher-student interaction, yes, it is there. Teacher asks questions and student reply, fine, interaction is there. Second is, again, there is interaction between student and student interaction. More interaction is there. Fine, what happens? Students, yeah, the students do their work, they do their oral activities. So there is interaction because again, the goal is interaction and it is being done. The students interact. So there is interaction between students and also between teacher and student. And again, the class is learner-oriented class. Learner needs are fulfilled, in fact. Learner requirements are met. Fine. So learner is important. Fine. Learner is there to learn the language, and the teacher does what he does. He directs, in fact. He helps the learner in learning that language. So therefore, the class is learner-centered class. And then again, the teacher is a what? Facilitator. The teacher facilitates rather than provider of knowledge. So in fact, this is what? Here, what? Teacher facilitates, he's a facilitator, right? And then another way, of course, we talk about GTM, the teacher is knowledge provider. See the differences, right? Here the teacher facilitates, helps the students, in fact. And this facilitation, of course, helps the students in learning that language. Another, of course, point is what the teacher, right? Another interaction is that enhanced and diverse communication with the involvement of more participants. Again, it's important. That maybe a group, two students can work or a group of students can work. And topics can be diverse topic from different, like we discussed earlier that of course situational based topics are there, and syllabus is what? Situation based. So since syllabus is situation based, so definitely the activities, or in fact the topic for discussion would also be from different, of course diverse topic, in fact different topics, I mean the teacher takes. And again, what? A better model of real life communication. Since the language, the purpose of language of course is interaction, communication, so this method in fact of course provides us a better model for real life communication, the communication that learner need in their day-to-day life, the communication that learner do find either in their homes or in their workplaces or in market, wherever they are, right? So learner are there and they have to use the language, because the purpose of language is to communicate. The purpose of language is to read, write and listen. And again, think also, right? So even some researchers say that thinking is the fifth skill of the language learning. So 4 essential skills, and some researcher, I told you that they believe that thinking is the 5th skill of learning a foreign language. So in this way, this is what students, a better model for real life communication, I mean situation based, in fact in activities are designed and the learner learn that well. So this is what we call it nature of interaction. Well students, so we were talking about the nature of interaction, and we saw that there is interaction among students, there is interaction between student and the teacher, and the teacher of course is the facilitator, and what he does, he also enhances and diverse communication of course with the involvement of the more participants are there. Now students, move on. The feelings of the students dealt. How are the feelings? Very important area. That, I mean, what in this method, the feelings of the students, how these feelings are dealt. So again, there's no principle to relate to the learner's psychology, of course. In this method, of course, there is no specific method that in fact we could relate to the psychology of the learner, in fact. What is psychology, by the way? Yes? What is psychology? Study of mind? Alright, psychology, study of mind, in fact. Sociology, what is sociology? Ology is study of what? Society. Alright, good. So here means psychology of the learner, learner psychology. Still there is no, the principle in this method, we have not seen anything in this class where in fact the learner's what? Psychology has been dealt. Again, learners at ease because teacher less authoritative. The point is that in this class, in this direct method class, students are comfortable. Why they are comfortable? Why? Because environment is comfortable. Teacher encourages, he motivates students, he is not authority, he is not authoritarian, so yes, the teacher, student find themselves at ease and comfortably. They take part in discussions, they take part in activities, and they enjoy learning. This is important, because this learning, in fact, a foreign language should not be a tough job. If you make a class, for example, where you are authoritarian and there is nobody can speak unless the teacher allows, so learner would not be able to learn that language. And I tell you, they would not continue that course. Then it happens that the learner joins a course and they feel that environment is not conducive, so they quit that, they leave that course, right? So therefore, here in this, the point is that learners are at ease, so they in fact interact, and because why? Because teacher is not authority, and in fact the learner comfort level is very high because students to interaction is more. Sometimes it happens that the students shy to communicate with the teacher. So it happens for many reasons. Maybe there are some psychological factors, maybe the background, and sometimes the students come from different backgrounds and they cannot interact, and maybe there is a communication gap, and maybe there is an information gap, for many reasons, my dear students. So we see in the classes that students hesitate to shy, in fact. But in this class, where the teacher in fact interacts with the students and he makes students interact with one another, so yes, that level, of course, the comfort level of the students remains high, because there is, if the student initially may shy, right, to talk to the teacher, but at least he would start talking with his colleague, in fact. So again, self-correction saves students from sense of embarrassment. Here, whenever the student makes a mistake, for example, student does something, so teacher does not directly correct him. So, and teacher, repeats his mistake, for example. The student says, for example, that, well, it is democracy. He says, yes, it is democracy or democracy. See? So again, through his correct pronunciation, or he in fact points to other student and somebody corrects him, in fact. So that is what self-correction, right? The teacher in fact helps the person. So he tries, right? The learner in fact tries his best, so he corrects him. So again, this is what a method, that is what self-correction. So we, in this way, the feelings of the students are dealt with. First one, there's no principle to relate to the learner's psychology, but learners are at ease. Their comfort level is high. Why? Because the environment is very congenial. Environment is very useful, interactive. Fine. There is no, in fact, pressure on the students. Fine. So definitely this learning, of course, when there is no pressure and the teacher encourages students, they encourage interaction. So definitely, my dear students, learning is more. What do you think? Yes? Fine. Like you, I ask you a question, you reply. Yeah, this is the method, of course. Fine. So there is no pressure. If you know the answer, good. Thumbs up for you. If you don't know, it's okay. No problem. Try. You can correct yourself. Fine. You all are future teachers. Fine. You all are consultants. Fine. This is what you have to do. Clear? Are you with me? Good. That's right. Spirit should be high. Fine? Okay, keep on working. Good students. So move on. Yes. Language. How is language viewed? Where? Yes. By the way, what are we talking about? Yeah? Principles. Fine. Principle of what? Of direct method. Good. Fine. So again, this principle, how is language viewed? What is language? Tool for communication. Good. Fine. Okay. So language, what are essential skills of language? Reading, writing, listening, speaking. And being teachers, what do? We in fact we teach these 4 skills. Maybe you might have attended a course in an institute. So over there what happens, generally in fact the 4 skills are taught. You go to a class where there is a reading class and the teacher makes you read and he uses different activities, and then you visit a class where writing is there. We also call it EA, error analysis, in fact. Or there's a class where listening is there. The teacher takes a tape recorder with him or laptop. Fine. Or the latest available technology, and he uses that, for example, in the class. So 4 skills are taught, in fact, in all language centers. The method, in fact, generally, of course, the direct method is used, but other methods are also there. For example, we'll move on when we talk about pronunciation. So for pronunciation teaching, yes, silent method is accepted, in fact. Anyway, so this one is the language is viewed that oral communication is primary communication. This is very important. That of course means the students communicate orally, in fact. So all 4 skills are there. Right? We talked about listening, reading and writing, all that. And you know that language consists of what? Multiple skills. For example, listening comprehension, speaking pronunciation, reading, writing, sentence formation, paragraph writing, grammar, vocabulary building, in fact. So this would of course mean that's what, that in this method of course language is viewed and oral communication is given high priority, the top priority. And again, all these sub skills of language are also stressed. For example, the teacher corrects pronunciation, teacher in fact students write, of course, make sentences, but mind you, how, which method? Inductive method, of course. So in this way, vocabulary building again by using. So here of course language is meant for communication, exchange of ideas, opinion, exchange of knowledge, questioning and answering in fact. And that purpose is met, of course. We saw that the purpose of this, the goal of this method is to communicate, to interact in different situations, and let's see, we are doing it. And again, the learning of language, what is meaningful in this method, right? How language is viewed? Language is viewed as in a real life situation, more realistic. And that's why the students enjoy learning, right? And the teacher, in fact, what? Love teaching through this method. And of course, if you see how language is viewed in this method, so one more point, students, you should remember that. What is the point? Yeah, everyday speech is essential to learn, right? Day-to-day dialogues, in fact. For example, if you see again, if I go back, in GTM, literary passage was taken. But here, we can take a passage from, for example, from where? Can you tell me? Yes, for example, a student and a teacher, maybe in a school, fine. Or you can take a passage, for example, where you go to a market to buy groceries, fine. Groceries, vegetables, you buy potatoes, right? Tomatoes, what else? So cauliflower, cabbage, okra, so all are veggies, fine. So you go to market to buy greens, buy what? Greens. And you ask, of course, that the veggies seller, that grocery seller, that yes, I need 1 kilo tomato, fine. And then of course you ask how much for a kg. See, there is a situation where we, of course, there is an interaction between a green seller, a veggie seller, and a customer. See, generally, of course, we go to markets. We have Sunday markets, we have Tuesday markets. So where we buy groceries, in fact. So again, we go to superstore, for example. Fine. So over there, you go shopping, for example. So this is what means that everyday speech is essential to learn, in fact. Now the culture, of course, is important. How is culture viewed? So my dear students, what? The knowledge of target language culture can be learned through art, literature, geography, history, information of community, knowledge of value system. Is that clear? So in this method, of course, definitely the culture is viewed. How? Through art, what? History, geography, information of community, and all that. So this is what means. Another principle is that culture is viewed in this method through different ways. Different means are there, either through art or through information of community. What language skills are emphasized? Fine. Or which language areas and skills are emphasized? Well, vocabulary is emphasized. How, dear students, vocabulary is emphasized? Can you tell me? Do you know? Learning, how we learn new words? Through sentence formation. Through sentence formation. For example, what is this? A mouse. So, can you make a sentence with mouse? Yes. Try. Which mouse is this? Fine. Okay. Now, wireless mouse. Fine. Okay. I move this mouse. Why do I move this mouse? Right? To move my cursor. Clear? I move this mouse, fine, so that my cursor would move on the screen. Fine. Can I move this case, spectacle case, to move the cursor? No, I cannot do that. Can you do it? No, you can't. So, my dear student, that of course, vocabulary is an important area of language, And how do we teach vocabulary in this method? How the teachers of this method teach vocabulary, of course, through sentence formation. Again, grammar, all right, practicing structures rather than learning rules, inductive method. So students practice using different structures. Fine, they are not given rules. Again, of course, speaking, asking questions, answering questions, practicing and all that. And again, focus on pronunciation. If a student mispronounces a word, the teacher corrects that pronunciation. I hope you understand. So fine. That's why you see that the method has been successful, because you see this, I mean, it incorporates all the 4 essential skills. Again, listening, fine, diverse speakers, teacher, other, of course, right? Because mind you that when you learn a language, so you cannot, I mean, when you want to learn language, so if you meet different people, right, or what should I say, if you meet different, I mean, of course, people of different professions, for example, so then your learning would be better. You would learn well. For example, you meet a doctor, yes, you meet what, a chartered accountant, fine, or you meet what, a shopkeeper, fine, or who else you can meet? You can meet a pilot, you can meet an army officer, you can meet a professor. So fine. So definitely, of course, when you meet diverse people, you would communicate, and again you would know different jargons, and this process would definitely help you, of course, in your communication. And then loud reading is there, of course. You read loud, and I have given you the purposes of loud reading. And of course there is writing, because all 4 skills are important, right? And 4 skills need to be integrated. In fact, all 4 skills are essential to learn a language. So there is also writing. Then, my dear students, the role of the student's native language or the mother tongue, very important. The question, what is the role of student's mother tongue? Can you answer my question? Okay, if I ask you, what was the role of MT in translation, in grammar translation method? Remember that? Was there any role? Yes? Okay, there was a role. Fine, students. All right. So yes, over there what did we do? We translated, in fact. We tried to learn that language with the help of translation. But here, no MT, no mother tongue, in fact. Fine? Fine. And then why? Because MT interferes. Mother tongue interferes in learning a language. I gave you an example that English sentence pattern is SVO, whereas Urdu pattern is SOV. So there are, chances that there would be negative transfer. So that's why no MT. And then again, we of course mean, what do we do? Right? The role of a teacher? Fine? Well, students, so this was the role of the student's native language or mother tongue, and we saw that we avoid mother tongue and we directly, of course, communicate in the target language. Now again, how evaluation is done, very important part. How evaluation is accomplished, in fact. See, because definitely once you evaluate, you have an objective. Fine? And that's why, of course, when you teach a language, so you set an objective. And in the evaluation, my dear students, what do we see? That have you met those objectives or not? So that's what the purpose of evaluation, to check whether those objectives are met or achieved or not, in fact. So that is what mean direct method objectives, teaching both oral and written communication. These are about direct method evaluation strategy. Very simple, students. I know you know it. The oral examination, what? Conversation. You interact, you give a topic to the students, they ask them to speak on that topic, or you can ask them the question, maybe interview, or what? See, you can ask them, you can give them a topic and they can speak on that, public speaking, or listen, and follow the instructions. Maybe you play a cassette and there are instructions given, and you see the student is required to follow instructions. I hope or you mime, for example. You can mime and ask the student to tell, right? Or you can play the match, fine, cricket match, and you mute this and ask the student to commentate. So again, these are of course mean direct method. Of course, evaluation is there. There can be pronunciation test, of course, on a topic and all that. This is what very simple. I hope you know it. Then this is what written examination, writing, sentence formations, right? Again, comprehension questions can be given, paragraph writing, dictation, fill in the blanks, and grammar exercises. These are what means exams that can be conducted to what? Evaluate. How does teacher respond to students' error? This is very important, the question. How does a teacher respond? What teacher does, by the way? Teacher ensures self-correction bias. This is very important. These students, the teacher in fact does not correct the student. We saw in the grammar translation method. Here teacher simply, right, he ensures correction through his body language, through his gestures, right? Teacher makes the student realize that, well, there is something wrong in that sentence, and student tries to find it out, of course. And sometimes the student know the sentence, it is just a slip of tongue or slip of pen, you will call it. Clear? So if there is a mistake in the second reading and the loud reading, student can overcome that problem. If it is an error, of course, so then the teacher becomes efficient, and he of course repeats that the error by the time the student comes to know, and he in fact corrects it. And of course, the purpose is not to embarrass the student. In fact, the purpose is to help him in learning that. So dear students, today what we did? Yes, first of all, we talk about brief about flaws, and then we talk about principles, right? Fine. How many principles we talk about? Remember, see, how many principles? Yes, the role of a teacher, right? What else we talk about? See, how does a teacher respond to students' error? And then how evaluation is done. What are the characteristics of language, right? Role of mother tongue of the students. What else? How language skills are emphasized, in fact. How culture is viewed. What else? How language is viewed. How are the feelings of the students? What is the nature of interaction? Fine. What else? So all these are the what, and what is the role of the teacher, and what the goals of using what? These principles. So dear student, today we simply talk about the principles of direct method, right? And again I tell you that, well, these principles are invisible thoughts. There is in all activities, in fact, they are aligned, and of course for every activity there is a principle behind. So in the next lecture, inshallah, we'll move on to talk about techniques, in fact. Fine, and we'll have a discussion on this method more. With this, thank you very much. See you in the next class. Take care. It's goodbye.